Adam Amin, Mark Sanchez doing the game on Sunday here against Minnesota, and we're lucky enough to have Adam joining us right now. Good morning. How are you?
Morning, gentlemen. How are you guys doing?
Are the Hawks 2-0 with you guys as well, right?
I think so, yeah. Back-to-back weeks we had them, so far so good.
How are you feeling about this one on Sunday?
Well, good to know that Gino was a full participant and was able to get through practice, and seems like he would be in line to get back at it. How is Seattle going to handle the pressure after what we saw on Sunday night against Green Bay with the constant pressure that was being delivered? How are they going to deal, and how is Gino going to deal with the Brian Flores scheme? You know, there's a lot made out of it. I thought the ESPN crew on Monday night did a great job towards the end of the game of breaking down why and what made them effective and why they're difficult to prepare for. We had some good conversations with Justin Herbert last week of the Chargers, and we were kind of breaking down some different blitz packages. He was talking about Tampa Bay and Todd Bowles and why they're unique, you know, very similar to what Brian Flores likes to do. It's a heavy zone, heavy blitz, dropping guys off the line of scrimmage, bringing guys from the second level. It's a little easier, if that is the right word to use, to deal with Minnesota than maybe Tampa Bay, just because there's fewer spots where the pressure is going to come from, just based on their personnel. You know, if Harrison Smith is creeping up, then that's probably a tell. If you know Andrew Van Ginkel is, you know, at a specific area of the field, that's probably a tell. But I think there's some really fascinating matchups to keep an eye out for. But I think that's where the game is won and lost for Seattle. It's at the front. That's been the case for a long time, whether it's in the run or the pass. And I think that I would imagine that after what we saw Sunday night, that's the kind of element that makes Seattle fans feel a little uneasy, especially given the added stakes to this game.
Have you had Minnesota yet this year?
Couple times, and I think we had them in a very poor offensive effort against Jacksonville that they won. Sam Darnold threw 3 picks, but their defense was excellent. I had them earlier in the year in a loss to Detroit in what was a really well-played game by both teams.
Okay, so you've seen them up close. They're sort of the big sleeping mystery of the NFL this year, right? Because they've only lost twice, and yet no one seems to be fully bought into the idea, and maybe it's just Sam Darnold, but it's hard to take them, I don't know, quite the same level of fear factor as some of the other teams that have been there for a few years now. How good are the Vikings? How seriously should they be taken?
I think they are similar to the other, you know, double-digit win teams in the league right now, in the sense that they have some flaws. You know, their offensive line, especially since the injury to Christian Darrisaw at left tackle, that's a major issue. They brought Cam Robinson over from Jacksonville. He's been penalty-prone. He's been pressure-prone. He's had a lot of issues, and that plays into what Seattle does well and does effectively with the multiple pass rushers and the different levels that Mike Macdonald brings guys from, and how effective a lot of these guys have been at their best when they are at their best in getting to the quarterback. So, you know, they have some flaws. Sam Darnold has done a good job of staying upright as often as he can. I thought he did a great job of it in the Atlanta game a couple of weeks ago when the Falcons brought pressure. I thought he moved around in the pocket really well. You know, Jefferson is one of the scariest players in the league. Just his separation ability off the line. You can be physical with him, but he's very physical in return, and he's deft, and he's not just a finesse receiver. That being said, he might be the best finesse receiver in the NFL. You know, like there's a multiple skill set there that makes him just really dangerous. Teams have played him off coverage. Teams have played him press coverage. Teams have bracketed. Teams have done a lot of different things to try to take him away, and that's only allowed Jordan Addison to become a better receiver and a bigger factor, and Josh Oliver to have a big season, and for Aaron Jones to be better in the pass-catching game. So they have a lot of good things about them. They have particular flaws about them. You know, their blitz can give up some big plays. As good as it can be when it gets home, they can give up some big plays. They've had a tendency to do that at times this year. So I think they're very similar to a lot of other teams. I'm sure that what most people see is Sam Darnold. And I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on it, just having seen Sam from his time in college out on the West Coast to seeing him in a prime slot in New York, and now seeing him, you know, kind of from afar and observing what he's done. we had the game with Carolina a couple of years ago where he came into Seattle and upset Geno Smith and upset the Seahawks. It's always been a matter of exposure with players like Darnold, who maybe don't have the track record of consistency and success at the quarterback position that other players like, your Mahomes and your Allens and, name your elite level quarterback right now. Those guys have consistent track records and Sam doesn't. So the question becomes the exposure. How long until teams figure him out? And between his ability to move around, the threats that he has at receiver, the developing one in Addison and the established one in Jefferson, and the play calling of Kevin O'Connell, I think that's how they've gotten to this point where they've won 12 out of 14. And the Brian Flores blitz scheme is hard to deal with. So they've had games where they've crushed lesser quarterbacks. So I feel like they're right there with the quality, but also they have flaws. Like they're very similar to Detroit, and they're very similar to Buffalo and Kansas City and these teams that have had issues at times this year, but have been able to use their talent in play calling and quarterback play to get past that.
Well, I think one of the big keys, and there's a lot of crossover between, to me, Geno and Sam Darnold, as far as, where they started their careers.
Yeah.
Sam a little more highly thought of, obviously, coming out of school and a higher draft pick than Geno was, but bouncing around the league, being around different people, rehab by different people. And I'm kind of curious, since you've had Minnesota a few times, and we had Daniel Jeremiah on yesterday, Adam, and he said in his mind, Kevin O'Connell was one of the 5 or 6 best coaches in all the NFL. Take Harbaugh, right? Take Reed, take Tomlin, because they're so experienced. Take them off the table. And that next group of young coaches, is Kevin O'Connell right there at near the top of the list with McVay?
I think he's starting to establish it. I mean, they've played a lot of close games under Kevin. They've won a lot of close games, and that comes down to execution on the field. And a lot of the times the ball was in the hands of Kirk Cousins, and the ball has been in the hands of Sam Darnold this year, a few times late in games. The ball has been in the hands of important players, and he has helped team that.
Yeah.
And along with that, because I do think, he's part of the young, great crop of play callers we have, but seeing how he interacts, it's funny to be around him. You ask him one question, it's a 5-minute answer sometimes. And I'm sure in interviews that you've had with me, brevity can be a problem for me as well. So
yeah, don't worry about that. We got Joe Klatt earlier this week. We only got 2 questions in 30 minutes. So
7.5 minutes.
Yeah, we're fine. You're doing great.
7.5 minute answer.
You're doing great. Don't worry about it.
Okay. I appreciate that. I love Joel as well. KOC is very similar in KOC is very similar in that, like, he just thinks things through, and he's very conscientious about how he approaches people. And he's very conscientious about how he approaches his players, how he interacts with them, the level that he relates to them. And again, being a younger guy certainly helps in that regard, but also just kind of having the overall empathy of being a human being. And I will always praise coaches who have that ability. I think it's an important thing. I just think it's an important thing as a person, and I always appreciate it when I see it. And, what he said to quarterbacks on the opposing sidelines. They beat Indianapolis on a Sunday night game, and he went up to Anthony Richardson after the game and was like, "You're going to be a great quarterback in this league, and you've got a great career." And it seems like he means it when he says it. And I think that has allowed him, and Brock, you've seen this at both levels. You've seen it at the collegiate level. You've seen it at the NFL level. When you're in those production meetings like I am, like, you see, they have to look at you and they have to answer questions, and not all the time, but more often than not, I think we get a pretty good sense, good or bad, of these people. And I think Kevin comes off as a genuinely easy person to get along with, and it seems like his players have a tendency to gravitate towards him because of some of those reasons. And I think that, along with the prowess, the intelligence, and the thought that goes into it, I think that's a hard thing to achieve, and every coach is trying to strive for that. But I think you notice it when you see it. And I think we've seen it in Kevin so far.
Obvious follow-up question. When we talked to you last, I think you were just about to do your first Seahawks game. Now you've done one, and you've been in production meetings with Mike Macdonald. What do you make of him in terms of some of those same attributes? Not just as a defensive play caller, because we know he's got some of that, but in some of those,
5-minute
head
answers?
coaching things. Yeah. I bet you didn't get 5-minute answers.
Nope.
No, they weren't
5-minute
5 minutes.
pauses before the answers, maybe.
See, now I'm not going to be able to think of anything
nice.
else tomorrow. When we come into the facility tomorrow, I'm not going to be able to think about anything else. I'm just going to go, I remember what Mike and Brock are talking about. Oh, boy.
He likes to pause because he thinks about it. Honestly, we're making fun because we interview him every
you.
Monday. And
it's
after,
not a we, it's a you. It's
and
you.
And after, oh, please, like you haven't. After 15 years of Pete, obviously it's just a different experience.
Sure.
But what do you make of him in the couple of production meetings you've been in?
I love the thoughtfulness, and yeah, we poke fun because he's well-meaning, and it's meant as a compliment, and it's meant in good fun. I just appreciate when somebody thinks about their answers and wants to, and listen, part of that is he's a first-year head coach in a volatile position. It's a volatile job and a volatile business. So I think having thoughtfulness about these things is important. Not having these canned answers. And listen, I'm not, I without using specific examples, I've dealt with it for years, whether it was at the collegiate level, the NFL level. Brock has dealt with it for years. And I keep going back to these meetings where you just kind of understand when something is canned, or it's rehearsed, or it's cliched, or commonplace. And not that there's anything wrong with those parts of speech, but you can tell when it just comes from a place of, I don't really want to think about this. Your time is not important. I don't take time to think about these things in this fashion. I just feel like if you can communicate to the idiot like me, then you're definitely going to be able to communicate it to somebody who's already got a prowess for this stuff. Yeah. And I think that's where I appreciate that thoughtfulness from somebody like Mike. He wants to give you the right answer. He doesn't give you coach speak. He will give you clinic stuff, but I think he explains it well in these meetings when he's talking about where he wants to bring pressure from or how he approaches an offense that he's seeing. I enjoy those conversations, and not to say that there isn't value in talking to Pete Carroll about anything football related, because you get these guys talking about ball. You got Belichick talking about ball. It was great. You ask them about philosophy. They want to talk about these things. And it took me 5 years of doing these production meetings and engaging what people were like in these scenarios to actually realize, oh, he's not going to tell us anything about his game plan, or he's not going to give us anything to tip his hand, which, again, these are embargoed meetings, and I'm annoyed by the paranoia as much as anybody is, but whatever, that's fine. But when they want to talk about a subject, their eyes light up. Pete Carroll's eyes would light up when I'd ask him about what he likes in a corner. When you think about what makes a great cornerback, he's going to want to talk about past guys that he's had. And he's going to talk about the Legion of Boom. He's going to talk about Witherspoon and Woolen and guys that he likes in terms of body type. I love the long corner and I want some height at that position. And, he would enjoy talking about those things. And Mike is really great at talking about what is important in that game that week. Because it seems like he thinks about those things and he thinks about them at a deep level. And I don't think those are things to be glossed over. I appreciate when you get answers the way we get them from Mike and you get them from Kevin. You get thoughtfulness out of these.